There we go. Okay, so we should be recording now. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Portinga. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Lake Superior Living Labs Network coordinator. Lived in Duluth for 8 years, and I'm now in Thunder Bay, starting my 3rd year living in Thunder Bay, Ontario, working on a PhD connected to the network. My job today here is just to sort of get us started. I'll be running the tech. So if you have any tech questions, feel free to use the chat and you can send those directly to me. If you have questions for the presenters as we go, feel free to put them into the chat, and we have time set aside at the end for a great Q&A. So go ahead and put them in as we go. I think that's okay, hopefully with Kathryn and Dani, and we'll get to them at the end. Okay, awesome. I'll facilitate that at the end. And then I think most people know this by now, but just in case you don't, since I'm sharing the screen, if that's filling your whole screen and you want to change the view, you can use the button in the top right to go from speaker view or gallery view, and you can change that as you'd like to fit the screen that you need, or you can hit escape if you don't want it filling the whole screen. Those are some tricks that can be useful. I recognize folks here. If you want to give a wave virtually with the icon or with your hand, Summer is joining us from Thunder Bay. Randy is joining from Duluth. Tobias, I don't know where you're joining from. If you want to put that in the chat, go ahead. That's awesome. And Kyla, I recognize your name and your picture. I think you're joining from Thunder Bay, but if you want to add into the chat where you're coming from, that would be beautiful. Otherwise, if I got that wrong, welcome, and we're so glad you're here. Awesome. Tobias, Washington, DC, and Kyla from T-Bay. Wonderful. Thanks for being here, folks. All right, so I will turn it over to Kathryn at this point and take it away.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. So welcome, everybody. I'm Kathryn Millen. I'm the founder and director of the Solar Commons Research Project, which is housed at the Minnesota Design Center here at the University of Minnesota. I also teach at UMD in the anthropology program. I'm a legal anthropologist with a focus on how people past, present, and future equitably share things they need to live a good life. In the English tradition, these are called commons. At a global scale, we'll be watching in November now how the United Nations Climate Change Commission hammers out an agreement on how to equitably share the gifts of the Earth's imperiled climate system. In international law, we call this a global commons. But at a community scale, we also make agreements about how to share common good. The Solar Commons Project aims to show how the sun's common wealth can be shared through solar energy panels that create a revenue stream to support the mutual aid work done by and for local communities. Community scale solar, community scale commony. You can find out more about that at our website. Maybe the next slide, Rachel. Yeah, there's our website for the project. So the next slide. So today I am here to talk with my community research partners at Bois Forte Reservation, Dani here, who I'll introduce in a minute, to talk about the Northland Solar Commons project that we're building with the help this year from an IONE grant at the University of Minnesota. A few weeks ago, you might have seen this announcement that Minnesota's only solar panel manufacturing plant, LEN Incorporated, here in Mount Iron, in the Iron town of Mount Iron, is planning to expand its facilities to perhaps become the largest in the nation. LEN, we're proud to say, is also our solar commoning partner. The CEO of LEN is working with us to host a fleet of solar panels that would help power their factory and create solar savings on their electric bill. So LEN would sign a solar commons agreement that would share those solar savings, be about $70,000 a year, by sending them to a trust fund. The trust would provide a 25-year revenue stream to support the work of LEN's neighbors about 60 miles further north on the Bois Forte Ojibwe Reservation. So that's the Northland Solar Commons project in a nutshell. These partners and this solar technology create a circular gift economy where the sun's commonwealth passes through solar panels turns into free, clean electricity and monetary savings, which are obligated to fund a community group who can build more commonwealth in their own neighborhoods. I'm going to introduce now the amazing young Ojibwe woman who is us. We would have been joined here by another partner who I'll introduce anyway in a minute, but I am so honored to be working with them. These are the women who are helping us create the tools to peer govern those funds so that they can effectively support the work that these women are doing to create a community economy around relocalizing and indigenizing the food system on the Bois Forte Reservation. Then after they speak about their work, or rather Dani will be speaking about the work of the Bois Forte Food Sovereignty Group, as our research partners on the Northland Solar Commons project. I'll return and I'll say a few words about the guiding principles and the research outcomes of this project, which is a Living Labs project for our Living Labs, Lake Superior Living Labs network. So I'll be talking about this as a Living Labs project, and just to kind of include all the learning from our community partners about how to use the Sun's Commonwealth for reparative justice. So it's really a pleasure right now to turn the presentation over to my research partner, Dani Pieratos, who lives and works and plays at the, is it Net Lake or Lake Vermilion, Dani?
I am a Lake Vermillionaire.
All right, a Lake Vermilion reservation of the Bois Forte Band. Dani is from Bois Forte, as I said, Lake Vermilion in Northeast Minnesota. Dani's work is rooted in food and body sovereignty and food access. Dani's motivated to make this world more livable, which is why she's so excited to contribute her talents to food justice work and is honored and grateful to found the Bois Forte Food Sovereignty Group with Renika Love, who unfortunately couldn't be with us here today. So we are together working on the Northland Solar Commons. I'm going to introduce Dani. I'm going to pass this over to Dani right now, and she can tell you a little bit about this project herself. Dani?
Miigwech, Kathryn. Bonjour, hello everybody. Next slide, please. All right, so I'll say bonjour, that's hello in Ojibwe, Dani Pieratos, Indigenous, Makwa, Nindodem, Onamani, Zagigan, and Duchaba. So hello, I'm Dani Pieratos, I'm Bear Clan, and I am from what we call the Lake of the Sunset Glow, also known as Lake Vermilion, District 2 Reservation of the Bois Forte Band. So I'm gonna start with some history of our food sovereignty group and then get into our project with Kathryn and onwards. So we started in May 2020 in response to an opportunity with the Northeast Regional Sustainable Development Partnership. We had partnered with 40 Acre Co-op to explore the possibility of testing hemp seed variety performance in northern Minnesota. And Renika Love and I, we were already in conversation about food sovereignty, and it's great because she's from the Net Lake Reservation, which is about an hour away from where I'm at on Lake Vermilion. And those are our two main districts. So we kind of tag team this. And so food sovereignty is the local control and choice in the food system for community well-being. And so with that opportunity, we decided to form the grassroots organization, the Bois Forte Food Sovereignty and Sustainable Agriculture Group. Next slide, please. All right, so the food sovereignty movement as a movement and as a phrasing was developed in the 1990s with a group from South America, La Via Campesina, and they brought food sovereignty to the international stage around these 4 principles. So I'm just going to read them right off the slide. The first is the access to affordable and culturally appropriate food. We know food is this emotional thing and social thing. Therefore, we should be self-determined in our food choices. Of course, local control of the food system, education and outreach, like the work we're doing with you all today. And then, of course, for long-term viability, sustainability, the use of environmentally sound practices as that other foundational piece. So we work along these lines. Next slide, please. Oh,
Did it
could you
switch?
jump? There we go. There it is. All
Sorry.
right. So why do we have to do this work? I mean, it seems pretty, at least to us, right, that those 4 principles are good. But what we're seeing and we all are impacted by is this globalized food system, and telling a story about how Bois Forte people have been colonized through food in the reservation system. Just note that this applies to many, many different communities. And so Bois Forte, we were colonized through the reservation system. So we were seasonal, traditionally food hunters and gatherers that followed our food sources. And then we were confined to one small area on the reservation. And so we would and did at times starve because we found ourselves at the mercy of federal commodity food programs and rations. And this slide shows food, reservation specific food memes we've pulled off the internet. And you'll see on the left, Rest Chicks be like, when you coming home, babe, I'm thawing out a roast for you. And it's a picture of bologna. That's our equivalent sometimes of a roast. This one almost makes me cry. Good morning to all you res kids eating hot Cheetos for breakfast and drinking pop. And finally, they made a Lunchable for the res, and you see a can of pop, chips, and fried chicken. Although these are all very tasty, but that's what makes it so hard is we've grown accustomed and adapted, not really adapted, but used to eating these commodity overly processed foods when they weren't traditional to us. And so the reality, while it's funny, is not humorous. Next slide, please. And so to get back to where we've come from, our traditional foods, just to note, the Nett Lake Reservation has its own wild rice lake. We call wild rice Millen. We hunt small and large game, eat fruits and veggies from the environment. And our lake over here at Lake Vermilion, we have netting rights. All of these hunting, fishing, and gathering rights are reserved and retained in our treaty with the federal government, the Treaty of 1854. So we have, not only as a basic human right, the necessity to self-govern our own food system, but we have it in American law. And so what this really means is, we don't just want to have production and processing infrastructure and capacity, but we need that legal infrastructure to get us there. And so we're also aiming for maybe 5 to 10 years, hopefully sooner, the creation of a tribal food and ag code so that we could have all-encompassing licensing authority. For example, we, like all others, would have to go through the USDA for meat processing, but Bois Forte itself, by its nationhood, and really outside of all these government regulations and lines, just as a community, have the right to have our own stamp of approval. All righty, next slide, please. So we have great opportunities here at both the Nett Lake and Lake Vermilion reservations where people access food already. And we actually have control, quote unquote, control options and choice at these different venues. So the biggest one we have is our casino, which has 4 restaurants on site. We have elder nutrition programs and community kitchens in our government centers at Nett Lake and Vermilion. We have a school K-6 at Nett Lake. So plenty of opportunity along with a couple gas stations. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, being very small and grassroots, Renika and I kind of steering the ship and leading it along, we've been having some trouble making progress. So it's really hard to do this kind of work without support. And so we're so thankful to Kathryn and Northland Solar Commons. She went out and earned us the $10,000 to build our capacity and our knowledge and understanding of the food system we're trying to impact here. And so our IONE, that's the Institute of Environment with the U of M, that funding, the project is split into 3 objectives. What we want to know is what is the best use of Northland Solar Commons funding for food sovereignty projects at Bois Forte at a very grassroots level. The Solar Commons Trust is going to give us about $3,000 in revenue per month for 20 to 25 years. So what's the most practical and desirable function this funding can perform to keep a food sovereignty project stable, impactful, and operational for 25 years. The first thing our little grassroots groups has needed is help to build our capacity, not just to study these questions, but to the more immediate needs of launching Solar Commons so that we can pursue those longer term goals. So how can our group fairly participate in the co-creation of community governance tools within Northland Solar Commons when we are yet so under-resourced and understaffed? What is going to bring us stability? So the solution we're working towards are inviting in anchor institutions such as Honor the Earth out of White Earth and the American Indian Community Housing Organization, also called ACO, which is in Duluth, Minnesota, who will maintain the admin for this at a certain fiscal sponsorship fee. And then these folks already have a proven track record of authentic decision-making that's grounded in Anishinaabe principles. So capacity for us will start with knowledge and having a deeper understanding of our peoples and our food systems. Next slide, please. All righty, so to start through IONE, we're going to use a full circle approach to this project. With the funding, we're going to research our food assets in need and needs in depth. So for more conventional research activities, we'll be distributing surveys through our reservation community health and family programs to get feedback on known barriers such as distance, affordability of available food options and their quality, and also how to get feedback on potential solutions the group is pursuing like a tiller project I'll talk about on the next slide. And so we're really grateful for this part because we get to partner again with Essentia Hospital Community Health Specialist, Jenna Ballinger, since she's right now working on a community health needs assessment. And they haven't got a lot of input from Bois Forte, and that's where Renika and I can swing in to conduct focus groups on the reservation, which we are going to indigenize into a talking circle style. And so while we have to meet Essentia's goals of studying, they're looking at social isolation, healthy food access, and the social determinants of health on the Iron Range where Bois Forte is located. We'll also have the opportunity from Jenna to have stipends or little gift cards for our talking circle folks. Let's see. All right, so at the same time, this funding is allowing us to reignite our collaborations with our tribal government. This past year and a half, they've had high staff turnover where we've had to re-educate new staff to onboard them with our vision for food sovereignty. We're trying to integrate this into the government because it's a local anchor institution. And the Tribal Council has not yet established a full committee to explore these ventures. So we're building relationships to support this next eventual step. And so we've been colonized in thinking in our systems here. We're used to having projects packaged and delivered in our community due to colonization. And we've been trained to implement, but not yet to innovate. So this has been the history of how things have been done here. And if we don't change this trend, we're not going to have a breakthrough in making a leap of progress that's desperately needed with an uncertain future ahead. Next slide, please. All right, so in general, we need more environmentally conscious asset building and similar vein educational opportunities and projects at Bois Forte. So on top of surveys and focus groups, we're using a project-based learning approach to engage individuals in this movement. We'd like to activate people as we're researching. So we're going to use a tiller that's been funded by Honor the Earth and combine it with IONE funding to evaluate the effectiveness of a small youth work crew to prepare and manage summer gardens for immediate food access right outside of a private home on the reservation. It takes time, knowledge, and a certain level of passion to get into gardening for your own food. And so our group is going to take this burden off of the people and expose them to this way of food access. Maybe they will take it up for themselves and maybe they won't, but at the least they will have fresh food at their doorstep from summer through fall. And this model can be shared with other communities after we evaluate the effectiveness of this strategy. So through Kathryn on the horizon, we also have the opportunity to work with Black and Chicano peoples to replicate this project in a few years in similar ways if we're successful. Having a tangible asset people can feel and touch, and reliable services people can engage with builds trust and the desire to participate and do the hard work to learn how to live in a better way for ourselves, our grandchildren, and our next generations. This offers us an experiential learning opportunity for IONE while providing an immediate impact through our project. Fresh food access right out the front door. We need to test how it goes in a real life setting, and with post-season evaluation metrics, we will get feedback to inform how best to build such a program over time so that it continuously improves how it meets the needs of our people. The surveys will identify a host of potential home garden sites that can be tilled and maintained by a youth crew. An exciting piece of this is For the Love of Lettuce, which is Renika's nonprofit, has a greenhouse to supplement whatever else community may desire and act as a fail-safe if something goes funny with our home site gardens. Our pilot size for spring, summer, and fall of 2022 is 4 households with 3 families in Net Lake and 1 on Lake Vermilion. We're hoping to know if this fresh food access strategy could be the best opportunity for Northland Solar Commons energy savings to make an impact on food sovereignty at Bois Forte. Promotion support will come in the form of online social media strategy developed in this project to let our people know this is happening and that it's time to join the movement. All in good fun with local celebrity Brandon Benner, whose radio show is known across the globe. He's going to do a promo ad for us. We are competing against the worldly noise, and it is so loud. We're going to test a big, beautiful signage at food access sites on the reservation, starting with the Net Lake C-Store, since they got a cooler from a Minnesota Department of Agriculture grant to improve healthy, fresh food access. Since we have this need to connect people back to the land, the lakes, the rivers, the spirits, our creator, and yet the worldly noise is so loud, yet again, it's going to stay all about promotions to get this to become our new norm, the revitalized norm with and for our people. Next slide. The future is full of danger for our next generations. We know this. Northland Solar Commons revenue is going to assist in building the resiliency of Bois Forte community membership to produce our own food, and with other opportunities like the up and coming Net Lake Farmers Market, we can create our own means of exchange to offer alternative economies in case the big one goes kaput. That no matter what happens in the rest of the world, we can rely on our family, friends, and neighbors to produce and service our needs at home. In fact, when pandemic hit and racial kind of civil unrest, I went to one of my elders and I was almost crying. I was like, what if everything goes kaput, almost literally? And she looked at me and she said, Dan, like, we'll still be here. Like, kind of, you know, what's the big deal? So I'm just really thankful for elder leadership and the resiliency of, you know, our community to just know that we will still be here. But how can we make it easier, just in case? So these pictures here were from funding from Honor the Earth. We built garden beds for raspberry foraging at our local Boys and Girls Clubs. Next slide, please. And so, like I mentioned, we are looking at, for our future goals, establishing a tribal food and ag code that really is community determined. We also would like to have 25% local sourcing at our food access venues, community food growing stewards, this paid volunteer crew, full food system infrastructure, production, processing, packaging, storage, retail, and emergency food access. And really what we're looking for is to live in a world without diabetes, without heart disease, without inflammation, without mood disorders, a world where we, as a friend had said recently, where we can just be Ojibwe. Next slide, please. And so with that, here's our contact information. Renika is a farmer And so she's in harvest season right now and is pretty busy. Mine, feel free to reach out. We just want to say we're so grateful to have made it this far together without giving up. Thank you, Kathryn, for linking our humble group with IONE and with this Lake Superior Living Lab. Bois Forte's future success and resiliency is equally tied to both food sovereignty as much as it is energy sovereignty, since this hyper-localization of production and consumption will lessen our dependency on outsiders that come with their agendas. This is how we are going to revitalize our nation and heal our people. Thank you all for listening. And back to you, Kathryn.
Thank you, Dani. So I can see, it's easy to see what an honor it is to be able to work with such young, dedicated farmers and agriculturalists at Bois Forte, and that, it's an honor to be able to try to create something like a stable income stream for this work, that can endure over time to assist in building it. So I just want to say in closing a couple of words about the reciprocity that the Solar Commons has built into the research methodology so that it can work respectfully with our Bois Forte research partners. We use a living lab methodology. In this, we're following an energy research practice used by the European Union Joint Research Council to study how the European Union can meet its climate action standards over its diverse jurisdictions. So the EU sets up living lab pilot projects that are sensitive to local laws and customs and engaged with local energy user experience as they seek to create overall standards. So similarly, in northern Minnesota, we can think of it this way. We have state, federal, treaty jurisdictions, as well as traditional Indigenous values and tribal authorities that we want to respect and incorporate in the trust agreements and the peer governance tools that we're building for this project. So we're working with Bois Forte Food Sovereignty Group members then as research partners to co-create our agreements and our governance tools so that they'll work well for them and still have standards that will allow for Solar Commons tools to be adaptable to other communities across the United States. So next slide. So again, for the Solar Commons project, we understand that the legal and the governance tools needed to build and maintain social trust among the hosts of a Solar Commons solar array, the trustees and the trust beneficiaries, in this case, the Bois Forte Food Sovereignty Group. We do this then by co-creating peer governance tools in the form of a digital dashboard. So rooftop solar owners, you're probably familiar with the solar app dashboards that showcase an inverter's electricity output and sometimes the solar savings that an owner sees on their electricity bill. So the Solar Commons dashboard that we're creating as part of this will also show these very measurable values, but it's going to also show other values. It'll show the sun's radiation, and that'll be a measurable commonwealth. And the dashboard will also track how that commonwealth passes through various value systems, becomes units of electricity, and then market price of electricity, and then social wealth trust funds. And finally, the dashboard's going to make a way to show how the community beneficiaries turn Solar Commons funds into a neighborhood commonwealth. So the dashboard is going to be able to generate an annual report to the trust protector. It will thus serve to bring transparency, trust, and flexibility to all partners engaged in solar commoning over the 25-year gift of the sun's commonwealth that is being captured by the solar panels. So it's going to be using art and interactive features so that all of the partners will be able to work together. So last slide. Next slide. So I want to say finally that the Northland Solar Commons we'll be testing our community solar ownership model at the scale that it can best distribute the Commonwealth benefits. In 2018, the Rocky Mountain Institute analyzed the Solar Commons financial model and scalability as part of our participation in the US Department of Energy's Solar in Your Community Challenge. The Rocky Mountain Institute analysts found that a 500 kilowatt system was the sweet spot for our model for this type of ownership. So bigger arrays would create more administrative costs and therefore less money going to the Community Wealth Fund. So this is a really interesting finding. So much of what's called community solar is developed as a giant investor-owned megawatt field site far from point of use. But our analysis shows that community solar does not need to extract such wealth from communities. It can be placed closer to where it's used, and the users can have closer, more reciprocal relationships with each other. So neighbors can even use solar arrays to create more commonwealth for their communities. And they can even do what the Solar Commons partners are seeking to do. They can heal their local landscapes with regenerative agriculture and repair the intergenerational wounds of colonial injustice. So these are principles of solar commoning that we're building in the system. It's a research project at this point. And with Dani and Bois Forte Food Sovereignty Group, we have created a research collaborative that is a living lab site. And so again, this is our project. We're going to hopefully have tools out of this, governance tools and others, and legal templates, agreements that we will make available then across the country, free to everyone. And we'd like to see solar commoning begin happening as a new form of what's called community solar, and really a new form of community economies that stay local and that really start to recognize what Commonwealth is all about. So I want to open this all to questions for Dani and myself about the project, about what's happening at Bois Forte. And yeah, so again, ready for any of your questions.
That was really lovely. Thank you both, Dani and Kathryn, for sharing with us. Really appreciated hearing all about it. I have written down a few questions myself, but I'd like to just open it up first to other folks who are here. So if you want to ask a question, you can unmute, or you can use the raise your hand feature or type it right into the chat. Those are all options.
Hello. I'd like to ask a question. This is Randy. And first, to just sort of comment that how exciting it is that this project is developing and maturing and, you know, connecting so many people and resources. And the second sort of question observation is, I'm wondering, given its presentation today to the Living Labs Network of Lake Superior here, if Dani and Kathryn, how do you see this connecting with other Indigenous communities and how in our region, and how does the watershed scale framework provide opportunities for learning and for doing?
Dani, maybe you can start with the connective stuff with tribes.
Yeah, what I would like to see is federal and state agencies being Solar Commons partners, accepting that, and then their energy savings go to tribes here's the hard thing too with tribal government authority. We still yet have we have the choice, we have the right to maybe not make the best ecological decisions or water protecting decisions, and our tribal governance structures were handed to us in 1934. the Indian Reorganization Act. So the reason why we have tribal councils and the reason they look so similar to municipality, governance, like city councils, and using Robert's Rules of Order is we at that time did not have our own capacity or know-how, or maybe we didn't even know we had the option yet. I think we did, to structure our governing bodies as what's meaningful to us based on our values. We had to structure ourselves in order to be federally recognized and to be able to work with the federal government in the way they wanted us to. So all of that to say, we are built, our governance system built off of the colonial model, and which means that for water protecting and just in general, honoring our Mother Earth in what we do first, not after, we're in a tight spot due to, money, maybe. So while I would ask that the funding from these energy savings be required to go towards water protecting and advocacy, all of these things because of tribal sovereignty and how important that is, that we do have the choice for good, for better or for worse. I would just say those energy savings should be unrestricted and could be unrestricted to tribes or outside of tribal governments to individual grassroots organizations. The Northland Foundation has taken a big step. Usually you have to be a 501c3 or have a fiscal agent, or a lot of monies are just open to governments themselves and they are just the gatekeeper. But what about the people? People have beautiful big dreams and ideas and are already doing the work right now. So I appreciate this space for finding an acre institution and maybe recommending that, these acre institutions that have a little more flexibility since they were developed outside of the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act, that they're contemporary and have more freedom, that, these monies maybe could go to governments, but maybe quote unquote should, or I would recommend that they go to individuals, just because I'm a beneficiary at the moment and I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. Thanks, Dani. So, great. I, exactly what Dani said about this, the way in which we can creatively think with the Solar Commons, in an iterative way. So yeah, why not have government organizations here that are that are starting to put solar up, that they could dedicate, some of their solar savings to a social wealth trust fund that is dedicated with and then uses these peer governance tools that we're building, and a trust agreement or a Solar Commons trust agreement that lets these community partners work together themselves for a reliable period of time, a kind of basic income structure for their efforts, for their coordinator efforts and things like that. At the scale of 500 kilowatts, we can fund a yearly salary for the food coordinator, for example, if that's what they want to do. And they can use all the tools to be very transparent about the money, how it's governed, etc. They can also have agreements among themselves that where, they can have the tribe and its governance structure be participating according to their own needs. So this is a community tool, and we would like to see, doing this with Bois Forte, if we build it and it works for them, in the using the kind of guidelines of reparative justice that we want for this community economy tool, that we think other communities will be able to use it too for local governance for similar reasons. So again, we're just, to be able to solve the problems with the kinds of issues that is faced by by the food sovereignty group here, we think we can design better this tool for iterative use. With regard to how it works with the Living Labs network that we have, a couple of years ago, we started the Lake Superior Living Labs network to connect our universities and to community partners, and then to learn from each other. What are we doing in communities, and to see if it would help us better do community engaged research. And I can't even, we would not be working with Bois Forte. We would not have anything of this project without this Living Labs network right now. Why? Because our partner in Sault Ste. Marie at Algoma University knew the CEO of LEN Incorporated, which is our solar manufacturing company, the only one here in Minnesota manufacturing solar panels. And so thanks to our partner in Algoma, who I never would have known otherwise, she made a connection. I got a hold then of the CEO, who again owns the manufacturing firm in Mount Iron. And from there, he loved the idea. He said, absolutely. This is how we should be working with our community partners. And from there it took off. So, that's just one example of how we are learning in our network from each other and each other's connections. And then we share, like we're doing today. We share what we're doing, what's working, what's not, and we get feedback. It's such a dynamic model for this Living Lab model and the network for being able to have feedback and to move through research and building these larger things that we as university researchers want to do, need to do. We're public universities, we should be doing. So with the network, we have absolutely, magnified, how we can work and the flexibility and dynamic kinds of things we can do. So this project would not be possible without this network.
Thank you, Living Labs.
Yeah, exactly.
That was really great. Thanks for the rich responses from both of you. Did anyone else have questions they want to ask?
Sure, so I'll go ahead. So yeah, thank you both so much for presenting today. I believe, Kathryn, we might have been in some meetings together, but Dani, I work for the city of Thunder Bay, and I am a part of the net zero strategy. So thinking about how to transition Thunder Bay to a low carbon future. And so projects like this, it's really, it opens my mind to the possibilities, because that's something I find we get stuck a lot on, like, oh, this isn't, this is how we do things and this is a pathway. And there's just so many possibilities here. And so kind of my first thought question, I'm still processing a lot of this, is so in this instance, the solar panels, it's all investor owned, is that correct?
So, this model, which has been studied by Rocky Mountain Institute, you can go to the website and find their analyses and their scalability and financial plan analyses. So this can be financed, just like anybody else would finance their solar panels. Once you put up a solar panel and start using it, it's making savings, right, for you. The free Commonwealth of the Sun appears on your meter as savings. So use some of those savings to pay the bank, and the rest of the savings go to the trust fund. So it can be done that way, but it can also be done as a donation. And right now, during this 5 to 10 year research period, where we are doing these pilot projects with community members, we would like to see donations for the 500 kilowatt systems. We have one system at 15 kilowatts that's interconnected and running down in Tucson, Arizona. And we started building the tools down there. But the 500 kilowatt system is where is our sweet spot. So yes, we will probably do one that's financed, and then instead of paying back financing for in 7 years, maybe it's back in 14 years. So as soon as it starts, it creates money to pay it back, and it creates the money to fund something in the community using these community economy tools we're building. So these agreements. And then, after 14 years, boom, all that savings goes to the community economy trust fund. So there's some innovations that are happening here with trust law. And it'd be interesting. One of the things we want to do with the Lake Superior Community Network is to see one in Canada, maybe in Sault Ste. Marie, and see how the legal jurisdictions might be different for trust law, because it's a very innovative tool and it's never been used like this that we know of. And so we've done on the website for the research, you can see we have a law review article coming out on this in the Vermont Law Review in this fall. So the article's up there. You can see the kind of legal issues we went through. We looked at the history of trust law. We've done a lot of research to try to understand what more flexible things our legal system has in terms of community ownership. And also, how does it create trust law, create relationships between our community neighbors, right? And the obligations that anchor institutions, and including universities, should have to our neighbors. And so we think that these tools, these trust agreements, et cetera, they can lay out relationships of reciprocity and obligation that we know we have and have done a bad job of, or insufficient job of, for sure. So yeah, we, it is very innovative, but if you want to use a traditional market system to do it, we know we can do that. We'll have one that does that, and we'll show exactly how it works so everybody can look at that. But we also, so this is a pitch to donors anywhere, right? You're looking for money if you're looking for places to sink some money that you want to do to impact climate change mitigation, do it with the Solar Commons. You also have a pool of money that you want to go to community reparative justice, put it in a Solar Commons too, because we're doing both. We're doing climate mitigation and reparative justice and community economies. So we think it's a good place to be as researchers and community engaged activists right now, to be building these tools for the energy transition. We want to see a just energy transition here. We don't want to just see, thousands of megawatts of solar laying over our prime farmland. We want to see also human scaled solar at 500 kilowatts on top of buildings close to where it's being used. And we want to see those partners able to fulfill their social obligations in the ways they want to through dynamic agreements that they can make with communities and have transparent relationships thanks to our digital tools, that can keep these things accountable and transparent. So that's what we want. We need to build it. We don't just have states and markets. We also have a commons whole area that for us to explore with and co-create, with community partners like we're doing with Dani and Renika.
Awesome.
Does that answer your question, Summer?
It does. And sorry if you hear the background, my dog is getting ready for his after work walk, so he's a little loud. Yeah, that's really helpful. It's really interesting because what we have as the city is when we install any solar panels, all of that savings gets put into a reserve fund, and then that's just there. And so we've been putting this all into a reserve fund, and we've been talking for a few years about what kind of structure we could use to kind of disperse those funds. And this is just, I have a few things that now I'm like, oh, I think I could bring this to the table, and that'd be really exciting. So thank you for all these resources. And Dani, one thing that really stuck with me from your presentation is when you were talking about, you're used to implementing and not innovating. And I think that that's something that, as somebody who works in a municipality, that I think we really need to remember, because we talk a lot about building partnerships, and it always turns out to be we design some program and ask somebody to implement it. So thank you for that piece of wisdom, because I think that that's always something that's fantastic to remember. So thank you again.
Of course. It is easier, to have something prepackaged and delivered. It's over time, maybe not, because then we reap the consequences of it not having it built here. But maybe there's and it kind of just is happening too, where we're that co-creation creative process. that's being studied within Solar Commons and the Living Lab. Just how that's done. I know we're getting a little bit more used to it now with equity, outreach and engagement, and where I'm thinking, and Renika with our on-reservation food sovereignty research, it's like, okay, not everybody. I asked my friend from 7th grade, like, food sovereignty, woohoo, let's go tap some maple trees. I've never done it before. She's like, I don't care. I want it, down the road where I can just go pick it up. I don't want to go get my hands dirty with, any animals or whatever. That's not her gift. That's not her heart. She has a different career and other things going on. Maybe over time when we do make it the new norm, but how much engagement is fair engagement for those community members who are still here, still have the same food access, choice and options that we all deserve, but how can we create a space where everybody can participate? But then again, like, what's that level of input to direct what we're passionate about and studied on? I still haven't quite landed. We have, of course, our survey tools and structures that we hope are getting at that in terms of looking at known barriers and potential like food demand. But I don't know if anybody's had that experience of negotiating, allowance of input and power and decision making, but from those who don't want it or care, we can't force them. And now I'm just rambling, so I will be quiet.
I wanted to add one thing to that at a different scale of this problem. This whole project, some of the ideas for it come from Peter Barnes's work. And Peter Barnes had this idea for the Sky Trust. So to use trust ownership, instead of having the carbon carrying capacity of the atmosphere be a taxable arrangement. So you would cap and tax, have a carbon tax, and then that would go to the government, and then the government would use it to run programs, and maybe those programs would be prepackaged and then they would go out to communities, maybe, if not just support a huge bureaucracy as well. So what Peter Barnes proposed was cap and dividend. He proposed that we say, the climate belongs to everyone. It's not a state or public property. It belongs to everyone, all breathers, future generations and others. And so let's charge a rent for it, for everybody, charge a rent, and then the rent will be collected. And the rent will be collected by the government. They have a role to play on this in a trust fund. And then the trust fund will not set up programs in the government, but just pay out that money in dividends to all citizens in the United States, So we can just use the government not to create prepackaged programs in this case, but actually to turn the money back into a kind of basic income. A feature, and then people closer to the need will be able to build programs themselves. So you can see how in a certain way we're doing something like that. That's called the cap and dividend project for climate mitigation. We were partners in starting with this project and with Peter Barnes. So you can see at our smaller scale, we really are trying to do that too. It really is about having more local governance over the funding, a kind of, participatory budgeting kind of idea with these funds. And the technology is there for us to be really creative with this. And at the largest scale of a global commons climate system and a smaller scale of the sun's commonwealth captured through solar panels, we can start thinking about commonwealth and how to distribute it, and then how to govern it as locally as possible for longer periods of time than quarterly markets and things like that allow. So more stability. So yeah, that trying to answer your and build on what Dani was saying.
I just put a link in the chat for the Northland Foundation for our area, northeastern Minnesota. They're investing monies right into individuals and grassroots organizations doing progressive or even art I mean, we need arts in all of this, which is why I love that Kathryn's worked that into the model. And so just if there's, those like seed funding, those are always nice. You can kind of pilot or test maybe some grassroots community innovations. Because otherwise, little Bois Forte food sovereignty group, maybe we would meet up every now and then, but Kathryn's provided the stability for us to keep our work together because, Renika is a full-time farmer. Before she was working as Indigenous or Indian child welfare social worker. And so went into farming, but we have a special role as unaffiliated grassroots org. But we put, the burden on our fiscal agents and other community partners. But it's really easy for me to speak on these types of conversations because I'm speaking as me, as an individual, on behalf of, our group's ideals. Whereas, I also wear another hat. I'm helping to develop an indoor aeroponic farm with my mama and my auntie and my sister. But when I wear that hat, I'm a little more reserved in how I talk, which is funny, right? Because it's like, I'm one person, should be able to, but out of respect for, that organization, that team, or if I'm on that board and I have that hat on, as a food sovereignty advocate, able to align a little bit more and draw a little bit more detail in between things that I wouldn't normally have the space for, which allows for innovation.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to add that, to be able to work with at this most local group level, where the problems are known, and we can bring more resources to those solutions, and then we can fund, in some steady way over time, so the work keeps going, and Dani and Rika don't have to stop and raise money, another $5,000 to do this next step. That's what we want to see here. It's that kind of planning happen.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you both. We're at our time, so I think we'll wrap it up for today. But thank you everyone for being here. Tobias, if you had questions, you can put them in the chat, or we can connect you over email to Kathryn and Dani. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. That's perfectly fine.
Okay, great. If you want to, you can just send your email directly to me in the chat, and then I can connect you that way.
Do we have just 1 second to hear the question? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, if everyone has time, go for it. Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It was interesting. It made me, the memes that Dani showed on the first, they made me think a lot of, like, we recently saw a show. I haven't seen all of the episodes, but Reservation Dogs. And it kind of like, I guess it's more of a commentary than a question, but I just wanted to say that, it totally reminded me of that. And it was cool to see, like, I don't know, that was the first time that I've ever seen that that type of, like, culture being talked about that in that type of way. So I don't know if, like, if that's how those two connect, but I just, like, wanted to say that was, like, that was one. And then the other one was, like, I saw, like, the another one of the pictures was about Ojibwe, was like a kid saying Ojibwe, having a shirt that talked about Ojibwe food. So if people in, like, the Northland want to, like, try to make a more conscious effort to start to eat things that are, like, would you have any suggestions on certain things that would be?
Yes, I'm gonna pull it, and I do have to run in a couple minutes, but the Indigenous first, we have a retail spot for Native foods in northeastern Minnesota. Indigenous First gift shop at ACO. I'm gonna grab the link here. You can order Indigenous foods from local, they do source from, I think, across the US, but a lot of it is local sourcing from Native either farmers or foragers. And so I'm going to self-promote here online. For example, there's Mazan tea, which is a wild rice tea My grandpa used to drink it when he would go out hunting on the weekends. And it would sustain him for a few days. It used to be made with more broken rice. But that's the thing about localizing food systems, right? Is we might think we lose a little bit of like variety in our choices, but we actually gain because we can access what our neighbors are already developing. So, and yeah, great note on the food memes. I think we can tell a lot about culture and the status quo about where those are at. It's just a sad, like, Cheetos, you know, for hot Cheetos for breakfast and pop. It's a classic. I drink tons of it. And that's the whole thing, right? It's like we're all in it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like if it wasn't so good, it might be easier to to not eat as much. But
right, feel
yeah.
hijacked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for your questions, and thanks so much for being here, for helping us think about our project.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your questions. Dani and Kathryn, thanks for sharing with us. And we really appreciate it. If folks think of it afterwards, go ahead and email Lake Superior Living Labs Network, and we can always connect you with folks if needed or wanted at a later date.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Enjoy
Thanks for
the rest of
being
your
here.
evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye.